After what has been described as astonishing and surprising election results, France is heading for an uncertain political and economic future, with the recently formed left-wing alliance, the New Popular Front, emerging as a dominant party. Now, this comes after Britain's elections last week, which saw the Conservative Party losing power to the Labour Party after 14 years of government. At the same time, the United States, two main election candidates, former President Donald Trump and President Joe Biden, they continue their race to the 5th of November polls. But how will the developments in France and Britain impact US elections as well as geopolitics globally? I mean, we saw what happened here in South Africa. People asked for change, and now we're working through this change. Thembisa Fakude is our guest, Senior Research Fellow and Director at Africa-Asia Dialogues. Great to have you. Thanks very, very much for joining us here on Morning Live.
Thanks for having me.
So, I mean, this year, 2024, has so far seen almost one could call it a seismic shift, historical shifts in geopolitics. The United Kingdom, France, the United States is still to decide on the 5th of November. Everywhere else in the world, I mean, I think I don't even know how many billions of people were voting. Are voters disappointed with populist parties and opting in favour of less popular options?
Well, yeah, sure. That's what we're seeing, especially in Europe. But of course, Britain and France signaled a different political shift, whereas the rest of Europe seemed to be moving towards the right. We saw what happened in Britain, of at least on Friday, when Keir Starmer was elected, and the Labour garnered a huge support from the British voters. In France, something similar happened. Everybody else was thinking that the Marine Le Pen right-wing-led organizations were going to take over, but unfortunately, that didn't happen. So there is a shift towards the left, but at the same time, there's a shift towards the left. One country that we forgot, which was very important, also had elections over the weekend, is Iran. Iran also tried to vote for a reformists, whatever that means in Iran's language. So there is definitely, you're correct, there's some sort of dissatisfaction with the current status quo in terms of politics.
Certainly. I mean, there's 50 countries around the world that are voting alone this year. I mean, if I have to go through the list, the interview will end, but there's certainly massive ones. I mean, if we look now at the foreign policies of Britain's Labour Party, do they differ from France's New Popular Front, the left-wing alliance? And could this shift also have a major impact on America's election results?
I don't think so. I don't think things are going to stay the same. There are two important foreign policy positions that most countries will be taking, and I think any change from those will indicate a shift. One is, of course, Ukraine. Europeans are adamant and have dug in their heels in terms of supporting Ukraine, except, of course, for Hungary. We've seen Viktor Orban visiting a number of countries, including Russia and China. And the second one is Palestine. Palestine is going to dominate the foreign policy either way we look at it. And we can't ignore Palestine now as a separate bloc. And those that ignore it, of course, lose elections, as we've seen happening in the UK. So Palestine, a lot of independents that have since garnered support and went back or have gone back to parliament because they supported Palestine. Case in point, Jeremy Corbyn and George Galloway. And those are the people who have been very clear in terms of their Palestinian position. So Palestine is now a constituency, or Palestine support has become a constituency. So those are the two things, or two foreign policy positions that I think many European countries will stick to.
Yeah, and quite interestingly, I'd like to get your views on the French President Emmanuel Macron's party. It really suffered a massive defeat, and Macron, though, has said that he's going to remain in office until his term ends in 2027. How much power is he still going to have, though, and what does it mean for the country going forward? I mean, the Olympic Games are going to be held there in just a couple of weeks' time.
I think he was brave enough, but he bit the bullet and took a position to call the snap elections. And the whole point was to prove or signal a position for the French people that France is, by and large, still a left-supporting nation. They are anti-bigotry, they are anti-ultra right-wing politics. It was a gamble, but it worked for him. And now Marine Le Pen cannot continue saying that Emmanuel Macron is weak and insist on calling for elections. So the calling of the snap election was very, very important politically for Emmanuel Macron. Now he sits much more comfortable and he can speak back to those who criticize him to say, I did call for a snap election and this is what the people want. They reject the right-wing politics of Marine Le Pen and others who want to take France back to political isolation and antiquity.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, we've got what's happening in the UK as well. I mean, after 14 years in government, we saw that the Conservative Party suffered its worst ever defeat last week. What went wrong for Rishi Sunak? And obviously, we're now seeing the new British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer's Labour Party, coming in, who are going to keep a very tight eye on things and very, very tight economic policies, promising lots with their health system and many other things. But what went wrong?
I think two things went wrong in British politics. One, Rishi Sunak, of course, being who he is and the way he looks, impacted on the voting. So there was a lot of racialism in the voting. So although we have already said that there's a left move, but within that left voting, there was a lot of conservatism and right-wing voting against a person who doesn't look like a common British citizen. That's the first point. The other point, I think, is Palestine. Rishi Sunak took a position that has been very extreme when it comes to Palestine, and we're seeing now that the Palestinian bloc and supporters have gained prominent positions in his votes, in this voting because of their support of Palestine. So I think those two things have been very key. The fact that Rishi Sunak decided to call the snap election, it was on a backdrop of an economy that has or was recovering. So the government of Keir Starmer is going to be having an easier job, by the way, when it comes to the resuscitation of the economy, because the economy, or the British economy, was already showing signs of recovering, and this is because of Rishi Sunak. But the fact that he was rejected by the voters in Britain, for me, is mainly because of those two things. And we saw the rhetoric or racial rhetoric against him leading to the elections. One. Number two is, I think the biggest mistake he made was his utterances and lack of support of what has been happening in Palestine, particularly in Gaza, as Israelis continue to demolish and bomb the Gaza people into submission.
Yeah. Finally, let's quickly take a look at the United States. They're holding their elections. It's still the debate as to whether Joe Biden should run or not. Is he strong enough for this? His age is under question. Can he beat Donald Trump going into these elections? What do you think?
I don't think so. I think the Democrats will have to make a very strong and take a serious position. We've seen a very incapacitated Joe Biden. There's no way that he's going to be able to make it. And I don't know why they insisted on these public debates, by the way, television debates. The next one that's coming up is CNN. And if he does go ahead with that one, we are likely to see an even much more dire situation and an embarrassing situation. It was very difficult for some of us to watch that debate because Joe Biden was simply not fit for purpose. So I don't see him making it against Donald Trump. They will have to find another candidate that will replace Joe Biden if they want to make it in November.
Yeah, Kamala Harris, maybe?
Possibly, but again, she's already facing a lot of criticism, but she could make it. But there are also a lot of other candidates who are really fit for within the Democrats who can do it.